Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Hi, I'm Scott Keele-Chisholm. I'm the co-chair of the Brain Science Network Steering Committee, and hosting this event with me is Talitha Ford, who is also on the steering committee. So on behalf of the Brain Science Network, welcome to our third event in the Outside the Bubble series. The early and mid-career researcher Brain Science Network is aligned with the Australian Brain Alliance and has a core aim to establish a platform for brain scientists, EMCRs, to develop into future leaders and drive Australian brain science forward. And this is off the script, but we have just had an article published in Australian Quarterly, and I recommend that everybody subscribe to Australian Quarterly or get access to a copy of the article. It was put together by most of the people on the steering committee, and it really does highlight the importance of having a strong and enthusiastic Australian brain science research community. All right, let me just share the screen for you just for a second. So here we go. All right, so we encourage you to link up with us. Okay, follow us on Twitter. So there's our Twitter handle, and register for our newsletter from our website. We don't publish a lot of newsletters, but once we have your email address, that's great. Also, you can actually join as a member of the network. So, and I'll talk more about that at the end. Okay. All right. So let me just stop sharing. How can I stop sharing here? It's better. All right. Okay. So without further ado, let's start then.
So thanks, Scott, for the introduction. Today, it's really a privilege to speak with Luke Schneider, who's a clinical psychologist at Adelaide Child Psychology, and Patrick Goodbourn, who is a firefighter with Fire Rescue Victoria. Now, hopefully most of this discussion will be, it's purely Q&A. So Scott and I will start off with some questions just to get things going, but please do put your questions in the Q&A, any questions that you might have for Luke and Patrick about anything related to what they're doing now, what they did previously, and how they made that transition. Now, all of the questions that you ask will be anonymous, so we won't be reading out any names, and that's mostly because we'll be publishing this Q&A, this seminar on our website. So please, if you feel nervous about being singled out, then you won't be identified in any way. So perhaps to kick us off, Luke and Patrick, I don't mind who answers first, but if you could tell us how you got to your current position and what you were doing within academia before you made that transition. Maybe Luke, you're first on my screen, so we'll go to you first.
Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm a clinical psychologist, and I actually run my own practice. So that's what I'm doing currently. And then prior to this, I was working in a research lab. So I'd finished my PhD, and I was in a lab looking at it was basically a neurophysiology lab, looking at cognitive outcomes and developmental outcomes for children born preterm. And so I was running those studies and writing papers, basically. So sort of early postdoc kind of work.
Super exciting. And Luke? Oh, Luke, sorry, Patrick.
Yeah, so I'm a firefighter with Fire Rescue Victoria currently, but I'm still working in academia, so I'm not outside the bubble completely. I'm sort of half in, half out. I did my honours in psychology in 2007, PhD in genetics of perception at Cambridge, and finished in 2012. I was at Sydney Uni for a postdoc for 4 years or so. I took up a DECRA at Melbourne Uni in 2016, and was on various faculty scholarships and mostly year-to-year contracts up until the middle of last year when I started with Fire Rescue Victoria.
Great, thank you. Just to follow up with that one, Patrick, I know that you were successful with a future fellowship just before you made the move to firefighting. Do you have any, what about receiving that future fellowship? Did it make it more difficult for you to make that move, or were you still had you already made the decision to go before those results were announced?
It's
not too controversial.
No, it's still kind of complicated because I'm still that fellowship's currently deferred, and the process that I'm navigating at the moment is can I do both? Can I have the best bits of academia and have this new career? So that's I guess the perspective that I can give you today is that from someone who's sort of in limbo in a way. But so I got the offer with FRV just before future fellowships were announced, and I was by that point fully committed to moving into firefighting. And I think the complication was that if that hadn't come through, then I think it might have been a cleaner break. It wouldn't have been something that had occurred to me that I might be able to do both. But yeah, I think by the time that came through, I had made a decision that certainly academia wasn't where I wanted to see at my whole the rest of my career.
Mm-hmm. Was that a bit similar for you, Luke, in that you were you didn't want to sit in academia for the rest of your career? How did you work out that was going to be the right decision for you?
Yeah, it's interesting, obviously, being outside the bubble, and particularly being a psychologist as well, because I've done a lot of self-reflection about how did I end up here, but also why did I end up here? And I think for me it's interesting because I think I'm quite risk averse, and so from almost immediately upon finishing my PhD, like I think I knew straight away that I wasn't kind of up for what I perceived to be quite an uphill battle to stay in the game. I sort of felt like, lots is never enough in academia. So in terms of research output and the constant fighting for survival, it wasn't, I think I knew straight away that wasn't really consistent with how I am. Like, I'm quite competitive in some ways, but in that way, I just felt like, I don't think this is, a whole career of this. It doesn't sit well with me. So I was funded by 2 NHMRC project grants that my boss got, and so I was doing a lot of work on those studies and doing some of those papers and doing research, but I think I at some level was prepared to almost ride those opportunities out, whilst in the back of my mind, keeping this or trying to formulate a plan for the future. And I the part that I've kind of reflected a lot on now in terms of being risk averse is that since being outside and working as a psychologist, I very quickly transitioned from working for someone else as an employee to contracting as an independent contractor for another clinic, to working on my own in a hired space, to now having a big premises and other psychologists working with me. And so that's really the opposite of being risk averse, but maybe it's just that this shoe fits better than the academic one did.
That's great, Luke. Are there any connections or hangovers that continue on with academia, like papers that you're doing and students that you may be supervising and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I'm still I still have an affiliation with the School of Psychology at the University of Adelaide, and I've actually just in the last week a PhD student that I've been supervising had her got her reviews back for her thesis, and she's done, which is fantastic. So I've been involved in that. And I've marked, I've been involved in a master's thesis marking. I'm just thinking, I've done some lectures as well within the School of Psychology, but I don't have any consistent appointment. And so I'm just at that time now where maybe I'm going to be somewhat further removed with my last student now completed. So I'm not sure exactly what it's going to involve from here. I'm not currently involved in any studies. I always have lots of ideas, particularly in terms of my clinical interests. I have lots of ideas that I talk to people about, but making the decision to jump in and actually start some studies, it's a big one, just given the time constraints that exist in this career. It would be a big move. So the links are weakening, perhaps, Scott.
No, it's good. It's good to hear. And Patrick, you kind of kept that foot in academia in a real way. But what were the kind of the key signs that you wanted to make that move, to jump into the fire, so to speak? What were those kind of key I guess indicators that you really thought that you wanted to get into another role than just being an academic?
I was unhappy a lot of the time, and that it wasn't sustainable. I love the job, and I love the work that I sort of went in there to do. I was finding myself pretty stretched, and it's not me. I'm sure everyone here can appreciate that, can identify with it. So I think when it got to the point where I was unhappy with work, not wanting to so at the time it was probably signing on rather than going into the office, because it would have been around the context of COVID, the first lockdowns and such. It was pretty clear that wasn't something that I could go on with. So I'd say, that was the clearest sign. Was just my own mental health.
Thanks. We've got a few questions in the Q&A, so I might start reading through some of those. The first one is, how did you manage the transition out, and in brackets, the retraining whilst working? Were there life factors that impacted your decisions? So maybe I'll throw to Luke first.
Yeah, so I see the question that asked about upskilling. I guess we can call it an upskill, a different skill from PhD to clinical psychology. So yeah, there is additional training that's required. So to register as a psychologist, you have to complete an approved program of study, which is typically a master's degree in psychology. So I had to apply for that and get accepted into a program, and then it's a 2-year master's degree. And I guess that's one very critical part of my story is that, if I didn't get into that program, I wouldn't be in this particular bubble that I'm in now. So the rule is you have to apply within 10 years of completing your honours degree. And I actually applied in my 10th year, and so I had one shot at it. So it was really a perfect storm that I could sort of see the end in sight with the funding opportunities. And this was my one shot to go for it. It was terrible timing because I think at that point my wife was pregnant and would be stopping work. And then I was contemplating starting a 2-year master's degree. But yeah, I did manage to get accepted into a program, and I was able to enroll on a part-time basis, which meant that I guess there was a bit of flexibility around that 2-year course. So I ended up finishing it in just under 2.5 years. But that extra flexibility just let me spread out my clinical placements a bit. So I was able to work throughout. So it was a really busy time where I basically was either at uni doing coursework, or on placement, or working within the same, because I was at the University of Adelaide for both. So I was able to work for 3 hours in the morning, for example, and then just walk across to the psychology building and do my afternoon worth of lectures. And I also did some work, some slightly after hours work to catch up with data collection. So it was pretty busy. And so I think that was a critical part, really, that I was able to do both for a little while, because that enabled me to afford to do it all and to survive. So someone has said that that's one of the things that puts them off of trying to do something else. And, I think that's a factor for lots of people. But I guess took the view that short-term pain, long-term gain was, my mantra, and that it opened up, obviously, for me, that program of study opened up a very clear career pathway. So I just came to the conclusion that it was worth the 2 sleepless years.
That's good. But there's a question for Patrick in relation, it kind of fits in with what you were saying, Luke. They're asking what are the best bits or parts, I guess, of academia for you now, I guess, rather than before. And kind of combined with that is this idea of not publishing as much as you would have had, the pressure to publish before. So yeah, could you kind of give us some insight into what you're enjoying now about the academia and whether the publishing is playing a role?
I think it's probably the same things that we all enjoy about academia, working with great people who are committed to a problem, highly skilled people, dedicated people, the freedom to follow to a whatever extent to follow your particular research interests. I think that's is what we're what a lot of us at least are in this for. So to just circle back quickly on the previous question of the life factors before I talk about publishing, but there were some huge life factors influencing my decision to not leave, and that's that was that kind of fear that what else is there? I can't spend, or I felt like I couldn't spend 3 or 4 years retraining, and that really held me up for a long time. In thinking about what I was going to do post academia, or whether I could leave academia at all. Sort of resign myself at times to okay, well, I'm just going to be vaguely unhappy for the rest of my life, and then I'll retire, and then but Publishing, things are still kind of ticking along. So I obviously, depending on how I manage to kind of coordinate the next 6 months and how things go beyond that, the research will, like, I'll eventually have published everything that I've done. But at the moment, we're being semi-productive on the given the amount of time that I've got to dedicate to it. And so that, for me, there's still going to be publications for the next 12 months, 18 months, so at least.
Great. I've just seen a whole lot come up in the question Q&A. So that's cool. Sorry, let me just read.
Well, I guess, Talitha, why are you looking? No, just why are you looking? Just for both of you, Luke and Patrick, is there any advice that you could give to people about transitioning out, the best, or some of the tips on how to transition out, that you think that people should consider when they're looking to jump out of the bubble?
I think it's probably pretty dependent on your career stage and what the considerations are. For me, having students, research students, was the one biggest factor that I wanted to manage properly, and getting a phone call, that to whether I have or not is a different question, but it was definitely in the forefront of my mind, was making sure that was in place. But I think also, casting, or not thinking outside the box, I guess, of where you could go, what you could do. So, one of the things that limited my thinking for a long time was we kind of have this, we treat working in academia or working in industry as this sort of dichotomy. So if you come out of academia, you've got to go into this industry. And that sounded like the worst idea for me. Like, I wasn't interested in going into industry at all. And so it wasn't until I started thinking kind of more broadly that I found a path that really appealed to me. And I guess the very last thing, as far as tips go, is think about it early as well. I was so blinkered in this being, and I think in a lot of ways you have to be, right, to keep going as an academic. You have to be so single-minded and focused on this. I think so. I mean, I think that's at least the perception that we have, and the attitude that we take. And I think for me that ended up kind of feeling like I was trapped in there, because I hadn't ever given any thought into what I would do if I was going to. It was academia or bust. And as soon as I found something else, it was really liberating. Just that knowledge that you could step away and on your own terms is, I think, something that it's really worth working to have. Even if you're not, if you're pretty sure that the academic path is where you want to go, just having an idea of what you would do, and knowing that you've got things in place to do that, I think is really empowering.
I guess on the question of tips, look, I think it obviously depends on individual circumstances, but I guess maybe I took an easy approach, because I applied for this master's program and left it up to someone else. Like, if I get in, I'm doing it, and if I don't get in, well, I'll have to think of a plan B. And so I never had to actually do that. This was my one thing that I chose to try. And I see that there's a question about what drew me to clinical psychology in particular. It was a natural pathway because it was something I'd considered 10 years prior when I had the option to sort of apply for a PhD or to go into a master's program. So it had always been there as an option and something that I had contemplated. But one of the things that I worked out throughout working in academia was that I really enjoyed the client, I call them clients now, the research participant contact and working with those families. And there were always lots of questions about the application of the research we were doing and how this could help and what we were hoping to achieve. And I really enjoyed that part and enjoyed talking to the people. And we were working at that point with children who had been born preterm. So the parents always had pretty emotional experiences tied to that, and so I was kind of naturally pulled into that, and so that really solidified for me that I probably would like this other pathway, and I can actually be on the other end of the research spectrum and be the one that's applying research that's been done by other people. So I guess I see it as a bit of a continuation, really. I've just jumped onto the other side of the equation.
Great, thank you. Somebody asked, did you feel any shame any of the shame that sometimes comes with leaving academia? And they followed that with, I've often read of people receiving those sorts of comments and being told that their research training and years of dedication has gone to waste by not pursuing their own funding, etc. Did either of you feel any, maybe not when you had finally made the decision to leave, hopefully by then you were like, this is going to be good for me, but in the lead up to that, feeling like, yeah, you were letting things go to waste at all?
Look, I think yes. I think everyone is contemplating that jump would have fleeting thoughts about that. But look, it wasn't a huge part of it for me because I was focused on what was going to work well for me and my family and the rest of my life. So, shame, I think, about my PhD going to waste would be really about what everyone else thinks. I was, I knew it was going to be a better option for me, and so I was comfortable with that. And I don't feel obviously like it has gone to waste in any way. I have had really valuable experience that I'm sure call upon every day in my job. I'm really good at looking up papers when I need to work out what to do about this particular presenting issue, or if I want to find out what the latest research is saying about this particular thing, then I know exactly how to do that. And a big part of my job is writing reports and letters and synthesizing information from all sorts of different sources. So I think that my academic experience has really put me in a good position for doing my job well. So it's certainly not two separate things that aren't connected. They're very much connected.
I probably draw on my experience less directly in firefighting, but I do it all. I wouldn't do everything exactly the same, but I do it again. I loved up to a point. I really loved that whole academic pathway. It was only sort of later on that I started not being happy, and yeah, I'd do my PhD again if I had that time again. And the as I said, I haven't left, so it's a bit harder to sort of Sorry, I'm getting a persistent phone call. Just turning the phone off. So it's a bit harder to give the perspective on that, but certainly the only feeling of that would come close to shame was the total investment that my family have had to make over what would have been 15 years of following me around the world to where the jobs are, and the commitment that they had made to it. It didn't feel great to then sort of put my hand up and say, actually, the thing that you've dedicated your life to for me. Actually, maybe I don't want to do that anymore. But certainly, I haven't felt anything from the academic community that this is something that's shameful.
That's good, Patrick. And I hope it's not the actual fire chief who is calling you, because you're going to be in trouble.
I've got a feeling it might be. Yeah.
You should have told him before. No, I'm only joking, mate. Somebody's asked a really good question, because they're fascinated about not only with how people make the decisions to actually to go outside the bubble, but also what you go towards. And so they're interested in what values took you towards the fire service.
So it has, strangely, it has a lot of the facets of academia that I love. It has that working in teams of highly trained, highly dedicated people, just to solve problems, and just the timescale of those problems and the urgency with which you need to solve them is different. And so there were, that aspect of it really appealed to me. But the other side of that was that when you were done, you pack up and you go home. It's not work that you take home with you for the most part. Sometimes when you're studying or whatever, then you might have a little bit of homework. But for nearly every hour that you work, you're at work and you're being compensated for being at work. And when you go home, that's your time and that's your family's time. And so there's no sort of, except for this call that I keep getting now, there's really little spillover into your personal life. So between those two things, it's sort of having your cake and eating it. Or that everything that I love about academia, but without any of the that creep where it can just take over everything in your life.
Does that creep happen still in the academic side of things? Given you do, it's one day a week at Uni Melbourne. Does the creep happen on that one day or throughout the week, kind of, so that you're on top of things for that one day?
Look, occasionally,
Yeah.
but it having and I've touched on this before, having the ability to just walk away if it gets too much is really well, for me, I found that really it got rid of a lot of the stress that's associated with that, and so I don't I generally won't check my emails on non-work days, and if I do, it's because I can actually approach it without it feeling stressful. And so I mean, again, this is all, what are we? We're not even a year down the track, so it's hard to say for sure, and as I said, I don't know how it's going to look in a couple of months' time, or 6 months' time, 12 months. But I certainly feel psychologically better prepared to approach how that works, having a career that does have that real is really circumscribed as far as what's work and what's home.
Any surprises, either Luke or Patrick? Any surprises when you actually made that jump out of the bubble that I guess you maybe didn't anticipate, and that people who are planning to make that jump out of the bubble might consider, so that they've got their parachute on, just to be on the safe side. Over to you, Luke. Yeah, you start.
Well, there's lots of surprises in my job, but look, in terms of being outside the bubble, the big surprise is that, and I think Patrick just said it, you can get paid for the extra work you do, and you get compensated for the hours you put in. So if we talk about things creeping in, I think, certainly my day doesn't finish at 5 o'clock when my last client walks out the door. Like I work a lot more after and before hours these days, probably, than I did, save for some exceptional time. So it's a lot more demanding on my time now. However, at the same time, I'm in control of that, and I can choose how busy I am in terms of how many people I see. And critically, if I'm writing reports, often that's paid time. So that's really different. And one of the big differences for me, in terms of my time in front of a computer, these days, my time in front of a computer often results in me being paid. But if it doesn't, it's also rewarding because it's something that I finish and send off, and it's done. I get a thank you, that's great, and it's finished with, as opposed to this long, painful process that writing usually is in academia. So it's a much faster turnover, and that's been a really nice surprise for me, and one of the things I really like.
I'd echo that sentiment. I think one of the biggest surprises is just being kind of realizing that what your value is. I think we probably, again, because of the way that academia is structured, we don't say no to anything. And we take on more and more without there being any compensation for that. And you don't, I guess to turn that into a sort of tip or advice is, but when you are asked to do something, you think about when you're going to do that. Is this going to be something that is just going to be extra time for you, or can you fit it in? Can you lose something else? Can you, don't keep taking things on without that being advantageous to you. And have, so I'm getting off the topic here now, but having people, more senior people, sort of mentors, who aren't necessarily scientific mentors, but people who you can go to and say, does this look right to you? Am I doing something else to do too much here? Or, really having a sounding board like that is really important. But I think, the surprise has been that your time is valued and has a value that you can lose sight of in, I think, inside the bubble.
Thank you. You might have touched on this a bit already, but just a bit more, I guess, specifically, how do you think your academic careers prepared you for your new roles? I think it'll be very different, I guess, for both of you. Were there many skills that directly translated, or you kind of thought in hindsight, that was really handy that I happened to learn that during my PhD, that you've been able to kind of apply in these new positions?
We don't use a lot of MATLAB at the station. And
you might.
So the specific skills are really very, very different. And I think, but I do think, in the fire service, everyone, like on my training, my what's called a recruit course, where you do your initial training. Everyone's had a career before. They've got degrees, or they've apprenticeships, and they've got substantial careers behind them. There's no one coming straight out of school into FRB, and just that that diversity of experience, I think, is something that's a real strength. So my experience in working in a lab environment with teams, working with people, solving problems, that's an analytic approach. That's something that I bring to it. But there's people with such different backgrounds that's I guess that's why that's that skill set, I guess, contributes to this kind of much wider skill set that diversity brings. So it's not a very articulate answer, but it's I think most of my points across there.
I mentioned before about, I guess, my ability to access the literature and research things, but one of the other things that was probably unique from my research experience was the fact that I was working with families, and so that is, I don't know which skill set came first in a way, but I work with children and families now, and that's something that I felt really comfortable with coming into this role, because I'd collected data and worked with people, and I'd arranged appointments, and I'd done all of that stuff previously. So just on a practical level, that was a very transferable skill, and something I was really comfortable with. When I went into my first clinical placements, I was already quite confident talking to families and hearing their stories. So, and that's because of the research setting that I'd come from. But yeah, it's hard to know where one thing ends and another starts. And I agree with Patrick that we are drawing on our past experience in lots of ways we probably don't even recognize sometimes.
I only have one more question, and we've got a question from one of the participants that says, speaking of skills, what are the new skills you've developed, and are you proud of them? But it kind of links in a little bit with my last question in relation to what's the best thing about the new jobs that you've got, because both of you are saving lives. In reality, you are working so closely with the welfare of people in a way that you probably don't see with the research that you do, or the direct impact that you have on families in both the clinic, but also out in the field. So what are the I guess the best parts of that new job, and what are the new skills that you've actually developed to actually help you to achieve those things?
Watching the microphone button there. Skills, obviously clinical skills and ways to manage some very complex situations. That's something that is an ongoing part of my development professionally, but it's also something I'm really proud of, because I've had some pretty challenging situations, I wouldn't have dreamt of being able to offer anything helpful before I did all of this. So I'm proud of how I've managed and helped in some challenging situations. What was the second part of that, Scott?
Just the well, both the new skills that you might have had to develop, but also what's the best thing about the job that you've got now? Yeah.
So the best part is definitely I guess the autonomy and the sense of achievement and the sense of security as well. So that's absolutely the best part for me. I know what I'm going to be doing in the future, and I know that that's stable. And so, I feel safe and secure. Whereas my experience of academia was that, whilst I really enjoyed what I was doing, for me, that undertone of where am I going to be in 15 years' time or 10 years' time, that was a real challenge for me, I think, psychologically. And so the best part is not having that part.
So I think one of the things that I've had to relearn, and that I feel like I'm getting better at and proud of, is the wording in the question, is that I've always had time to think about things in academia. It's always pretty much every time you've got the time to make a decision, see if it works. Okay, I'll try that again. We'll tweak it this way. And there's not to say you never. I mean, you're often feeling a sense of time pressure to do things, but it's a slow, comparatively slow process. And I've never been good at making definitive decisions. We have to do it this way, but in firefighting, you get one chance to do it, and so you got to make a decision really quickly. So that's been a real change in the way that I've had to operate, and something that I'm really enjoying learning and getting better at. I did overlook one thing that I think that it occurs to me regularly, but I didn't mention it. It was that one of the transferable skills from research, and this probably applies across the board to a lot of different careers outside of academia, is that understanding of how important it is to set things up right, and to have your equipment set up right and calibrated and maintained properly, so that when you know that it's going to do exactly what you expect it to do. And that's something that I really enjoyed in academia, and something that translates directly into fire services. We spend a lot of time just making sure that everything's ready to go, working like we expect it to. And the best part of it, I mean, there's lots of great, I mean, you get to ride around in a fire truck and lights and sirens and all that sort of stuff, and you feel like you're actually making a direct impact. But the security, the job security, I think I'll have to agree with Luke that that's something that really makes a difference. That knowledge that you've got something there that is ongoing, and something that you can kind of dedicate yourself to without having to worry whether it's going to be there tomorrow or in 6 months or next year.
Great, thank you. Maybe just one more before we wrap up, unless anyone wants to put any final questions into the Q&A. And this one ties into the second last question that's in there now too. They mentioned it's a bit of a personal question, but asking whether there's anything that whether there was any grief or sadness from, well, Patrick, you haven't fully left yet, but in that transitioning into a new role and leaving academia, and in line with that, is there anything that you really miss about having a full-time role in academia, or has it just been really life-changing and only a positive experience? And if there was any grief or sadness in leaving, and anything that you really do miss, how do you manage that in your day-to-day?
Patrick just said it. Probably one of the things I do miss is the time to sit and think and contemplate and work out the best way of doing something, because life outside does feel a lot faster paced in some ways. I often want to look into something more than I can, and there isn't time to sit and think, and so that does add a different pressure where you have to make decisions really quickly and hope it's a good, educated and appropriate one for that particular situation. So I definitely miss the sitting and thinking and researching things really thoroughly. But life-changing is definitely the word I would use for my decision. And my wife and I, because she's recently also stepping outside of a bubble, having been a lawyer for 16 years and now she's doing speech pathology. So, we often talk about how it was just so amazing that I, got into the master's program the one time I applied, and where would I possibly be now if I didn't do that? Where would I be? What would I be doing? Who would I be? So, I'm very, very happy that it panned out the way it did, and absolutely no regrets at all. And no regrets for doing a PhD or working in academia for the years that I did either. Like, I really enjoyed that, and it shaped, the future beyond. So I don't see it as a waste at all. It was part of this journey, and I'm really happy with that.
Thanks. And to you, Patrick?
Yeah, I have the same experience. Certainly no regrets. When I think about things that I miss or that I would like more of, it's always the people, right? That was and is continues to be the big thing about academia for me, is those collaborations and those working relationships that you have. Much less so than, I'm passionate about the topics that I study and the techniques that I use, but it's really the people that make a project or a workplace for me, and so yeah, the things that make me I guess nostalgic for it, or when sort of start to think, I could do this more. It's always having conversations with those people that you find really stimulating.
Great, thank you. We might need to start wrapping up now. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time to speak with us today. I'm sure that your insights and experiences have really, I wouldn't say inspired people to leave academia, but hopefully given people some something to think about if they're considering that kind of a move. Scott, do you want to talk about becoming a member of BSN and the Twitter and website?
Sure thing. Okay, let me just bring that screen back up again, because I just wanted to let you know that membership of the EMCR Brain Science Network is open for all early to mid-career researchers, and that's less than 15 years, believe it or not, since your PhD was awarded, excluding interruptions, of course, because some of us have some time off. So PhD students as well, but also the general public who have an interest in brain science. So if you have an interest in general EMCR issues, we encourage you to also become a member of the forum, the EMCR forum, and you'll find that also on our website, and the URL is there. So check out our website, join up, and keep connected with us. That would be fantastic. All right, over to you, Letha. I'll just stop sharing. There we go.
Yep. And just to wrap up, thanks everyone for coming today. The next, we'll be running another one of these outside the bubbles, number 4. And that'll be held in the second half of this year. So stay tuned on Twitter for announcements, and also probably emails from people within the network. Yeah, and if you'd like to see any of the previous, so this is number 3, if you'd like to see any of the previous Jobs Outside the Bubble seminars, then they're publicly available through the website. They're on YouTube. So please go back and have a look at those. There's some really great insights from other people who have transitioned from academia to industry. We might wrap up there. Thank you, everyone.
Terrific. Yeah. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Cheers.